Hey everyone.
We are live.
We're live. We're back.
We're back from Labor Day.
Yeah, I hope you all had a great Labor Day weekend while we took 1 week off. But we're back in full force tonight for a Trigger Warning 2A podcast.
Right. And we only have the best when we come back. We come back. Okay?
Come back hard.
We come back hard. All right? When they go low, we go. No. Well, we go high. We do. And the highest level we could go is have an amazing guest, which we do have. And that's Erich Pratt of Gun Owners of America. He's gonna join us in a few minutes after we talk about the news and what's going on, because a lot of things have been going on since we were enjoying our day of no labor last week. Yes.
And I won't even dive into all of my thoughts on Labor Day and why that's a
right.
holiday.
I know.
My libertarian thoughts. So
we'll get your take on that later. Yes, we will definitely get that. So yeah, we're gonna go straight into it. So the first thing I want to talk about was what's going on with the primary race, the Republican primary race, which might not actually be a primary race, considering that 4 states have said they're not going to have a Republican primary. But that's another topic. So we've had a Joe Walsh. We've had Bill Weld, who was one of the first primary.
I forgot about Bill Weld.
Yeah, Bill Weld is still there.
Yeah,
I know. They confirmed it today, actually, when I found out that Mark Sanford, Republican congressman of South Carolina, I think he's a former congressman. I'm getting that wrong or not. He is actually getting into the race as well. He's joining the race.
Oh, all right. So we've got lucky number 3 from the trying to primary Trump crowd. But I'm not sure how successful any of these primary challengers will be. Not just because I think Trump has a pretty good stronghold on the Republican Party at this point, but also because of something you pointed out, which is that some states are going to eliminate the GOP primary.
Right.
Entirely.
Yeah, I think it's Arizona, Kansas, South Carolina, and I always get the last one. I think it's official 3 of them. So those 3 are the ones who said that they are going to do that. But yeah, I mean, so okay, first of all, looking at even Sanford's, I looked at his website for president, and literally I took a screenshot of it. None of his issues. I was like, okay, maybe his Second Amendment issues, maybe he's better on that. Has no word on that.
Oh, of course.
Does not say anything about the Second Amendment
That's
or
how
gun
win
rights.
The presidency as a Republican.
He's going as the financial, not even fiscal, but financial conservative. Okay. So he's really going on like Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh is more on the anti-Trump train when he's very vocal on that one, but they're both very much on the being anti debt, going against like the trade deficit and stuff like that we've had and stuff like that Trump has had. So that's what they're really basing everything on, and being anti-Trump. That's a lot of their campaign, I think. Yeah,
so pretty close to the Democrats with that. At least in terms of the anti-Trump is why you should elect me.
Anti-Trump is a policy for them.
Yeah,
that's what they've made it a policy.
Yeah, it's not really it's kind of their only policy, at least on the left. But yeah, and also for the other Republicans, I mean, they can say they're going to try to be more fiscally responsible than Trump. And quite frankly, Trump hasn't been the most fiscally responsible, but a lot of Republicans aren't. So I'm not really sure how strong that's going to go, or how strong that's going to be against him, when a lot of people, especially Republicans, think that he's done a lot of good for the economy.
Because of people with jobs. Okay, I see.
Yeah, and also the tax bill that was passed, even though, quite frankly, that didn't help my taxes at all. But for a lot of people, they have at least the illusion that they're saving some money in that regard. And until recently, the stock market had been really going up a lot. So I don't know. I'm not sure how the economic play will go for people trying to challenge him.
Right. I don't know if it's going to get enough it's not going to excite enough people to be like, well, I mean, it really should, and I wish it would. Trust me, I wish it would. I'm still heartbroken when I found out the numbers of the percentages of this is like after Rand Paul was out of the race, in 2016, and I was trying to find some semblance of what's going on with America, what's going on with the Republican Party, and they had this whole study about the different percentages of like the nationalists and like the populists, and like then they talked about basically the Rand Paul type of Republicans who are like fiscally conservative and stuff like that, and it's 5%.
5%. Oof. Yeah, we gotta work on that. Because really, if you're, I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a conservative, but I do think that conservatives should be trying to conserve liberty, first and foremost. And so I'm not really sure what they're conserving now, but it seems like they've lost the plot, a lot of them. Especially, we've talked about how some of the Republicans in Congress have been pushing forth gun control legislation, all of that, especially of late.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of that, the session has, their recess has officially ended, and Congress is back in session, which I've actually been, part of me has been dreading, because I know what's going on, particularly with the Republican Party, but also excited is, I don't know, I mean, excited, but, basically just, very, what's the word? What am I missing right now? But basically, I wanted to see what was going on, like what was going to actually happen with the red flag laws and stuff like people have been saying while the recess has been in place.
Yeah, so, what we can expect from them, or what they're going to lay on the table here as soon as the session gets going.
Right. Yeah. So there's we already know most of it is red flag law focus. Crenshaw has been making that a priority, and really he's been caught up in that for a long time and talking about that. So what do you think is really going to happen? Do you think a lot of what we've been hearing when it comes to especially the Republicans is really going to happen? Or I mean, we've had multiple mass shootings since then, and Walmart and all that great stuff.
Oh yeah, and the whole Walmart thing's kind of interesting. If I do think that might help small gun shops,
right?
Because people can't just go to Walmart anymore. But I'll be curious to see. I hope that the Republicans in Congress will kind of stick to. I'm sure that most of them campaigned at least on some kind of pro Second Amendment platform. So hopefully they'll stick to their guns, especially as it turns literally stick to their guns and figuratively. But I hope that they stand strong on that. But quite frankly, I've been so disappointed by Republicans in the past in areas like this, especially if the progressive leftist types get really passionate about something and really gung-ho about pushing something through. I feel like oftentimes the Republicans will kind of fold. And so I hope that they won't do that, especially with the red flag law, because I don't know if I've seen a more dangerous piece of legislation in recent memory at all. Like it's some really scary stuff in there. So I hope that it just doesn't go anywhere. I hope that the Republicans realize that it's a losing vote for their constituents in terms of getting reelected. And hopefully the constituents actually will be true to that and not reelect anyone who does vote to pass any of these gun control laws. But we just have to kind of see. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that's the same thing. I have the same idea of we're not going to know until it happens, but I was looking at was Washington Post, though, so take that with a grain of salt. Basically, you were saying that Republican leadership is really looking to President Trump and what he says about things. So they're just wanting to take their cues. I wouldn't even say they're wanting to take their cues. I just think they're trying to basically put the blame on him just in case.
Whether people freak out or they love it, it's like, oh, it was Trump.
Right. So we'll see how it goes. But I mean, it's up to us as constituents, as as the gun vote, right? The gun vote matters, that we have to be active in it. So but before we get to an organization that's doing a great job with that, you have a couple of updates. What's been going on?
I have a couple quick stories. This is kind of some Colorado based stuff. The first one, I just find it more interesting. There was a student in Loveland who he was I don't know if he was officially suspended because he's back in school now, but he at least was temporarily suspended. Spoiler alert. But he was at least temporarily suspended because he used Snapchat to he was going to go to the gun range with his parents. Both of his parents are big 2A defenders and gun rights advocates, so to speak, and they take him to the range all the time. He's a teenager. They want him to learn how to use guns responsibly because they know he's going to be using them. So they take him to the range, and he sent out a Snapchat, I guess, that had So there were several guns in the Snapchat, but none of them were loaded. And I mean, we were joking earlier about how the news coverage has covered this, but in effect, the caption on the Snapchat was "finna be lit," which is really just slang for, you know, I'm excited, I'm gonna go have fun, something like that. But these news stories, like, I don't know, I kind of just want to read this one.
Say what it says in that article. Okay, what did Urban Dictionary say
about
it?
According to Urban Dictionary, an online crowdsourced collection of slang definitions, the word "finna" is also used in the place of the word "gonna." And according to Merriam-Webster, "lit" is slang for excited. So that's an actual quote from this article. But I just think it's really interesting. In effect, I think that this shows how red flag laws could go wrong, because in effect what happened is one of his fellow classmates saw this Snapchat and said that it made him feel scared because he didn't know what this whole "finna be lit" thing meant. And he didn't know what any of this stuff meant, and he was just scared by the very sight of guns. And so I guess this school has a program that's called Safe to Tell, and I understand why they might have put something like that in place, because there has been times where fellow students can kind of say, you know, this student has a diary where they're planning a school shooting and they have it mapped out, and, you know, they have actually stopped some school shootings with policies like this. But the issue is that there's no due process there. There's no standard of how are we actually going to decide if this student is a threat or not. And in this case, he literally, it was images of guns that weren't even loaded, they weren't even in use, and he got suspended just for that. And so it just also shows how extreme of a difference there is between people who are trying to make sure their kids are educated about guns, know how to use them safely, and people who have just raised their kids to be scared of the very sight of a gun. And so I'm really glad that the school reinstated him. I guess they had a meeting with the parents and they were able to work it out.
And I also public outrage. I mean,
yeah,
come on.
yeah,
That's
I know.
the only reason
Come
that
on.
actually changed.
Seriously, because really, if no one had reported on it or talked about it, I bet that kid would have gotten suspended, and maybe he would have gotten expelled or something. Like, who knows how severe of a punishment he would have gotten just for showing a picture of, not even exercising his rights yet, but just a picture of a gun is enough to.
He was finna
he was finna exercise those rights. And then the other quick story I just want to go over before our guest, just for those of you who might be in Colorado who this might affect, this city of Longmont is passing a resolution, or they're going to try to pass a resolution that is just so draconian. It's even worse than the red flag law that we passed at the state level. And that's because, it limits magazine capacity. It would require you to have a concealed carry permit, even to have a gun in your car.
It requires a certain type of gun for you
a certain kind of permit, for you to have a gun in your car. And it also, listen to this language. This is from the actual resolution itself. Red flagging individuals who have given family members and or law enforcement reasons for concern about their mental or emotional stability. So it's not there's no language in there even about being a danger to yourself or others. It's just like, is this person stable? And what does that even mean? Right. None of this is defined. So just for the sake of not making our guest wait too terribly long, I won't go into all the details. But if you are a Longmont resident and you want to do something about this, there's a city council meeting on September 10th.
Tomorrow.
That's tomorrow. Holy crap, I didn't even realize it was September 9th. But yeah, it's on September 10th. And I think...
It's at 7 p.m.
Yeah. And it's at Civic Center in Longmont. That's at 350 Kimbark Street in Longmont. So people always ask, what can I do about all this stuff that's happening? It's like, here's an example of where, if you're a Longmont resident, you can go and tell the city council that you don't like this bill, that it's a violation of your rights, or this resolution, that it's a violation of your rights and you don't want it passed.
And even if you're not a Longmont resident, I assure you, we're going to have every town over there. We're going to have Moms Demand Action.
They're going to be up in there for sure.
So yeah, I mean, they're trying to do what they did in Boulder, and then make this not only a state issue, but then a nationwide issue.
Yeah, because if enough cities do that, that's more reason for, at the state level, for those legislators to be like, look, all of these other counties and cities are trying to do this. That's what the people want. So make your voices known, go up in there and make a ruckus even. Not a ruckus, but make sure they know that you don't like that bill and that that that's a violation of your rights if they pass that resolution.
And if it's not bad enough, actually, I think it's Prescott Gun Club, who's actually a new Patreon. Of ours. So thank you, Prescott Gun Club.
New patrons, we love you.
Yes. A patron, yes. So he actually told me that Longmont is a sister city to Chicago, Illinois. That they actually, hundreds of years ago. That's why it's a home rule district and home rule city, because they actually, so just the connection is very
interesting and
very close.
And so Chicago is known Illinois. For its free gun rights and stuff.
Right.
I know. Anyway,
and pro-gun gun rights. So
in any event, but yeah. So if you're in Longmont, if you're available to go to that city council meeting, go make your voices heard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But don't make us look bad, please.
Please don't. Please. Yeah. Don't embarrass us.
If you do, don't say that we told you to go there. Please.
Yeah, if you're gonna make a real ruckus, don't tell us that we sent you. Don't tell them that we sent you. Excuse me. But yeah, maybe we should turn to our guest.
All right. On that note, we're going to bring in our guest, the man that you've been waiting for, Senior VP of Gun Owners of America, Erich Pratt. All right.
Welcome, Erich.
You got him?
Thank you. Hey, guys. Hey. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be with us.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we're really jealous of your background. We feel like not your background as a person, but the background that you have right now seems very professional.
I know. You've got the whole library thing happening.
Well, thank you. Although honestly, the dirty secret is a lot of them are just boring books you'd never want to read anyway. They just look good. Okay.
I see the Constitution in the back. I don't know. I don't really see anything. I can't see anything. I'm sure you have a Constitution in the back course somewhere.
Oh, we have plenty. Yes, we have plenty of those. But I mean, there's things like studies on the presidents and things like that. It's good for getting you to sleep at night.
Encyclopedias.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Back in the 90s. That's awesome.
So I was going to ask, just to start off, Erich, for our audience members that might not know much about you, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to the position you are today, and why you advocate for the Second Amendment.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that could be actually a long discussion.
It's a big question, huh?
It is, and I didn't necessarily get here in kind of the traditional route where, a lot of people grow up, hunting and fishing every weekend, and that wasn't necessarily me. For me, it was more the faith, family, and freedom route that got me here. And, with my family, I mean, on my dad's side, it was 1968, and he took me even before the 68 Act. I was in the store with him. I was a little guy, obviously, but he was buying our family's first gun because he heard on the radio the police chief saying that, with the riots going on, that they may not be able to contain the riots if they went into the suburb areas. And we were living in Maryland at the time. And so he thought, my goodness, if the police are saying they can't protect us, I'm going to go get a gun. And so that's how, we first started. So that's on my dad's side. On my mom's side, it's kind of interesting. My great grandfather was a signer of the Declaration of Independence for Panama.
Cool.
When they broke away from Colombia. And so we've had family members who've been in government, even president, things like that. And so that same year, my dad was buying a gun. She was down in Panama helping to get her uncle elected president. And he was elected for like 3 days. And then there was a coup, which Noriega was a part of. He was, I think, a general then. And so for like the next, 20 years or so, it was just dictator after dictator. But anyway, so from my mom's side, I get this sense of, the freedom of why it's important. Yes, it's good to have a constitution. Panama had a constitution, but that wasn't enough to stop bad guys with guns. And so just the importance of having the people armed to be able to resist tyranny. And so really from both sides, kind of a double barrel there. Just from family side, I was, I guess, kind of born into this. Although, honestly, even with that, I wasn't necessarily looking to go into defend gun rights, although I was certainly pro-gun all my life. And, I did grow up shooting. Even if I wasn't in the woods, I was shooting and, taking lessons at Quantico and things like that. But I think what really did it for me was actually in becoming a Christian and looking for direction and guidance in life. And I really started developing a passion for defending freedom. And it cost me a little bit. I remember at a family get-together telling one of my distant relatives, I want to spend my life fighting to protect the Constitution and the freedoms that we have. And I remember her just looking at me like I was crazy and saying, what are you talking? Are you serious? She just mocked me. But, that's just a passion that I have. So anyway, I'm here. I've been with GOA for about 30 years. And, GOA is known as the No Compromise Gun Lobby. We have over 2 million members who are very loud and very active, and we've had some very notable victories over the years. And one of the things we're especially happy about is, we were the original organization getting behind constitutional carry. And now we have 17 states with permitless carry.
I didn't know it was up to 17. That's excellent. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I just wanted to comment briefly on something you said, which is that when you really kind of delved into Christianity is when you started to become passionate about defending liberty. And that's something that Antonia and I can both resonate with, because I've told her that if I weren't a Catholic, I don't know if I'd be a libertarian. And similarly, she's kind of talked about how her Second Amendment advocacy is really sort of her mission. Like, it's like fulfilling, or I'll let you explain it.
Well, yeah, basically, I have a similar story to you, but after becoming a born-again Christian, realizing that I want to defend, I need to defend life, and that includes, I'm very pro-life, but also defending people's, right to defend their own life, right? So, and I know when when we say stuff like that, people are, how can you put Christianity and then you want to have guns right after?
Yeah, how could guns be related?
They don't see that, right? They don't see that correlation. But
well, honestly, though, from a Second Amendment perspective, it's the reason why we are so no compromising. Because if we agree, like what our founding fathers said in the American Declaration, now I know I talked about the Panamanian one, but now the American Declaration of Independence talks about rights being God-given. Right. And so if they're given by God, that means they're not privileges given by the government, and that means we're not in a position to negotiate or to compromise when the government's trying to limit them or take them away. We don't even have the authority really to say, okay, we'll settle and agree for certain restrictions. Not if it's a God-given right. So anyway, that's where the passion and the drive comes for defending our freedoms.
Absolutely, and it's definitely a given. And so I told people. For sure. Sorry, I see Edgar. Okay, cool. I told people that we're going to announce our other special partnerships. So we talked about custom caliber flags, and they got to see our new cool empowered flag. I'll show you a picture, Eric, in case you haven't seen that. It's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty awesome. But the other partnership, and I'm really excited to announce, is partnering with Gun Owners of America. We have a special code which actually gives our listeners 25% off Gun Owners of America membership. And I will preface first that 100% of all of this goes to GOA. I was actually the guy from Guns and Gadgets, and that all the money that he's raised doing the same thing. And I talked to the people at GOA, and I was like, I want to do the same thing. This is how we can help you guys. And so you guys get a benefit as well, our listeners. You can go in the description box or in the comment section, and Edgar is providing the link for everyone. So you guys can right now get 25% off a GOA membership and help support the cause. So that's our special partnership announcement.
Right. And
well, I just want to say thank you for doing that, you guys. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. We need all hands on deck for this to work.
And I really love the work that Gun Owners of America does. There's not not every gun organization am I willing to just put 100% of my support behind, but Gun Owners of America is great. You guys do great work, so I'm super proud that
Thank you.
You guys are working with us.
Right. I think that's the thing is like when you make it no compromise, then people can be 100%
yeah, then even libertarians
nice
can
right.
be 100% with you.
Exactly. So yeah, you guys do good stuff. So and then I was going to talk about, so that kind of brings me to what's happening right now in Congress. We talked about how the recess has ended. And I just wanted you, Eric, to talk about what you guys are doing in D.C. or, outside of D.C. Not everything is on the federal level. It's the state level and even more so the state level. I know there's Rachel in Texas battling out with Greg Abbott right now and what they're doing over there. And Dan
Rachel
Patrick,
does great work too.
She does do great work. Love her.
Yes.
But what's going on in D.C. and with GOA?
Well, that's obviously where the big battle is. And,
right.
Obviously ever since the tragic shootings in August, we are just fighting for our lives for, to stopping the train that's headed our way, the anti-gun bandwagon. And it's a shame because, you expect the Democrats pushing it, but as you guys were really alluding to beforehand, just going through some of the news wrap up, there's a lot of Republicans that are considering gun restrictions. So there's a lot of negotiations going on. Basically, the bills you have that we're dealing with are the red flag gun grabs, the universal background checks, and ban on commonly owned firearms, AR-15s, and things like that. But I think probably the most dangerous of those is the red flag laws. That's the one that has really the greatest chance of passing. So anyway, we've spent the month of August just trying to rally grassroots around the country to contact the president, to contact especially the GOP representatives and senators. And we've been able to deliver over 2 million messages to GOP legislators and the White House. And, it's exciting in one sense. We've seen a little bit of a mood change. The president has backtracked a little, not completely, but he did do some backtracking. We saw some Republican senators saying that gun control is dead and that it's not going to go anywhere. Now, I think that may be overly optimistic, but certainly it's encouraging to hear people on the inside saying this. But, I don't say this to say, okay, now we can rest on our laurels. No, we need to keep generating and folks need to keep contacting their representative, their senators, especially the GOP legislators. This makes a huge difference. We've been meeting with offices at the highest levels on the Hill. And one of the things they've told us is, this would already be a done deal if it wasn't for grassroots gun owners like what you guys have, because they've told us, look, inside the Beltway, the echo chamber is horrendous. It is the media's power is so loud. They make it feel, they make them feel like, they've got to do something or they're going to be kicked out of office. When really, what we've tried to convey to them, it's the opposite. If you go the route of restricting our liberties, and I've sat in these meetings with them and I've reminded them, look at what happened to Bill Clinton. He lamented several times that he lost the control of the Congress because of gun control that he signed into law, the Brady bill, the semi-auto ban, especially the semi-auto ban. Al Gore's campaign lamented that it was gun control that cost him 3 very key Democrat states, but pro-gun Democrats crossed over, voted for Bush, and so Gore lost the election. Certainly gun control didn't help Hillary for as much as she pushed it. And then on the negative side, usually where gun control has really bitten the Democrats, we see examples like Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, who, she lost by just 1,000 votes in 2016. And it was because of her support for gun control that key gun leaders in the state said, we're done with you, we're not supporting you. And all it took, it wasn't a massive Republican revolt against her, but it was just enough that said, we're not going to vote for you. We're either voting Libertarian or we're staying home. She lost by 1,000 votes. And so this is the message. I mean, we try to give them the Second Amendment message, but we also try to give them the political realities message as well. And from what we've heard from them, and by the way, we commissioned a survey. Several thousand people responded. Over 98% of gun owners would say that they will not vote to re-elect a legislator who supports red flag laws. So, we're conveying to them, look, this is your kryptonite issue. I mean, this is going to harm you if you go down this route.
Yeah, and I saw that. I actually just saw that survey right before I got here, and I was like, yes. And it was a pretty high amount, even for red flag laws alone, being against red flag laws. So it's so good to see that, and that's why it's important. I mean, you have 2 million people, gun owners who are part of GOA saying, obviously, who are going to vote. Like, right. This. So versus like the Washington Post polls and stuff we see that are just like, they're not even the people that we're talking about, right? So right. We know for a fact, these are the people who vote. These are people who are involved, and they're anti-gun law, they're anti-red flag laws, and they're anti-gun control in general. And they will make their voices known. And it's good to know. To hear
right.
that.
And I do think that we should recognize our power in that we do kind of have, I mean, not a veto vote, but we have enough people where we can kick some people out of office if they're really not doing
right.
What they need to do to protect the Second Amendment. But my question for you, Eric, in that regard is, why do you think that the red flag law for some reason is getting so much more traction than all this other gun control that has been, proposed over years and years? Because they've been trying to pass gun control for a long time, but for some reason my theory is that it's because we've talked about mental health on the side for so long that now that people are phrasing this red flag law as if it's about mental health, people are just kind of jumping on the bandwagon. But I wanted to hear why you think the red flag law is getting traction, because to me it seems insane, but there's a lot of Republicans who think that it's all right. So I don't know.
You're absolutely right. In fact, early on, this was sold by, and I would call them kind of the establishment types, but they were trying to sell this as gun control that Republicans can support. And I think that started resonating and started catching fire that way. And so, we made a concerted effort, especially after the Parkland shooting last year, when this started to take off, because up until then, really, it was only other than the state of Indiana, it was only the blue states that were passing this. But then you had Florida pass this, and so now there was it was like a shot in the arm, where now maybe more Republican states could latch on to this. And so we made a concerted effort. We started mobilizing in all the states that didn't have them to work to defeat it in the state legislatures. So that was one thing. We started, authoring some op-eds in USA Today and other places, notable places to make the case this is not gun control that Republicans can support or that conservatives can support. This is gun control. This throws due process out the window, and it results in good people dying, like Gary Willis, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, a very tragic case in Maryland where after an argument, a relative just simply made the accusation against Gary Willis, and it turned out later just simply a way of getting back at him after the argument. But the problem with red flag laws, and Maryland has a red flag, is that you don't get your day in court. The police show up at your door. And so they showed up at his door at 5:17 a.m. in the morning. He answered the door with a gun in hand, which, I've talked to a lot of gun owners, and every single one of them has said, that's how I would answer the door at 5:17 a.m. when it's still dark and I don't know who's there. And so anyway, the end result was he ended up being shot to death. So this is a very tragic thing. And this is the problem when you're throwing due process out the window, you don't get your day in court, you don't get your attorney representing you, you don't get to face your accuser, you don't get a trial by jury, you're just surprised by this, as Gary Willis was, well, of course you're going to have tragic cases like this. Unlike, I mean, let's say there had been a false accusation made against him. If it had been done the proper way, the way we've done law in this country for 200 years, you've got, charges are filed, but, it's got to be for some sort of actual threat or crime that would have to be alleged. But at least you get to have your day in court. And you get to go through all that before suffering the penalties if you're found guilty. So anyway, that's the problem with these red flag laws, is that they throw due process out the window.
Yeah, and also they're ineffective. They're just blatantly ineffective. I think it was Dave Kopel, his study, because he testified in Congress not too long ago about him, and he's saying that over 1/3 of them are erroneous charges, and that they end up getting, not thrown out, but finding out later that they were actually not a case that would warrant a red flag law. But, most of these people don't get their stuff back.
That's right. Exactly. That's what I was going to say, that even though with many of these state laws, they say, after 10 days, 14 days, you get to have your hearing and get your guns back. And what they're finding through this study that Dave Kopel was citing is that it's actually like an average of 10 months before they get. Months. So if that's an average, that means some people are waiting over a year. Wow. So they're having their guns confiscated for a year or more. This is not proper law enforcement. Right. These laws are terrible, and anybody who loves liberty needs to, in fact, if I could just segue just for a second. Absolutely. If you go to our website at gunowners.org, we've got several alerts at the top of the page. And I mentioned earlier, we've generated over 2 million messages to the Republican GOP legislators and the White House. It's really important. I encourage people to go there. Just with a couple clicks of the mouse, you can send a letter. And I would just reiterate again, you've got these legislative offices say, it would already have been a done deal, but they've heard so much of a kickback from gun owners that it's really, slowed down the process, because you've got the media pushing, but thankfully gun owners and those who love the Second Amendment are engaged as well, and they're taking action. But anyway, I just want to encourage more of that, and you can get those alerts at gunowners.org.
Great. And I think that's a great message too, because I don't think people realize how powerful it can be if there's enough grassroots individuals contacting congressmen at the federal level. A lot of people think, I'm just one person, what is my one letter going to do? But if they get flooded with letters, then they start to perceive that their reelection is in jeopardy, and that's really all they care about. So so they'll change their ways if they see that. So I agree. And when we're done with this podcast, I too will go to your website and make sure that I can have my voice heard in that regard. And I wanted to comment on one thing you said, Eric, because I think part of the reason why this is so nefarious is you're right. There's this elimination of due process with the red flag laws. But I think that what's really strange to me is it's kind of in this weird place. Like, it's not a criminal thing. It's not really a civil thing. So they're not applying any of the standards that are, our whole court system has been creating through the common law for, hundreds of years. Instead of applying all of that, they're just throwing in this new thing. It's like, it's not that you're being charged with a crime or anything like that. We just think that you're kind of dangerous to yourself, so we're just going to take your rights away. But that seems to me to violate, obviously, the due process clause in the Constitution. But also, it just seems to be creating this whole new area of law enforcement that shouldn't exist and that has no right to exist at all, but also will result in, like you were talking about, people will be killed as a result of this. Not just will they lose their rights, but whenever you have police raiding homes to, take property, especially if they don't have a warrant based on probable cause or something like that, that's when people get defensive and they have weapons at the ready to defend themselves. So I just can't. I don't see any positives coming out of a bill like this. But I was wondering what you were thinking about this, how they've kind of phrased it in this way where it's really not that you've committed a crime, but it's just that you're dangerous to yourself. And I also think I just want, there's a couple questions in the live chat that are somewhat in this vein. That's while we don't want to annihilate due process, what do we do about individuals who might really be a threat in terms of suicide risk, or a threat in terms of some of these people who are so nihilistic that they might commit a mass shooting? So yeah, a few people in the chat were asking what you would think about that, or what solutions you do think there are for people who do have mental health issues.
Well, first, let's start with the premise that if you're, let's say, not behind bars and you're still on the street, there is nothing that anybody can do to keep you from getting your hands on some type of weapon, whether it be car keys to run over 86 people like that guy did in France and murder 86
Bastille
people.
Day. Yeah, that was crazy.
A Bastille Day, yeah. Or to get box cutters to hijack a plane and kill 3,000 people, or do what the Oklahoma City bomber did and killed with a truck and fertilizer. In other words, an evil heart is not going to be stopped just by taking his guns away. They tried that in July in Illinois. They took a guy's guns away because he was a felon. It wasn't actually, even though Illinois has a red flag law, it wasn't the red flag per se that they were using to take away his guns, but they took away his guns. Well, that didn't stop the evil in his heart. He still had samurai swords, and he used one of them to stab his mother repeatedly, chop her up into bits, and stuff her into a trash bag. I hope nobody's eating dinner at this point anywhere watching it.
We call it trigger warning for
disgusting.
A reason.
Right.
but the point is that just arresting the guns isn't going to make anybody safer. So what can be done? Well, the first thing is since ultimately, it's people, the potential victims, being able to fire back. And, even the FBI has documented several cases where good citizens have stopped mass shooters.
Oh, yeah.
Stephen Williford was one that the FBI mentioned. There was a firefighter in South Carolina. There was an Uber driver in Chicago, a doctor in Pennsylvania. Many other cases where this has happened. So ultimately, we have to be the ones to be able to protect ourselves, exercise our rights. And so along with that, it would really help to repeal the gun-free zones that are basically creating these magnets for these killers. Because, we may say, oh, they're crazy, but you know what? For some reason, they seem to target these areas where guns are banned, and yet it obviously doesn't stop them. I'm sure you've seen the statistics. John Lott has studied all the public mass shootings going back to 1950. Over 90% of them occur in these gun-free zones. So encouraging concealed carry, repealing gun-free zones would make a huge difference. But then, I think there's one other thing, and that is, try going to a airport and making a joke about a bomb in your suitcase. I mean, you know what's going to happen, right? I mean, you're going to be in handcuffs and let out of there. The point is, speech doesn't protect our right to make threats against people. You can't threaten somebody. You threaten the president, you're going to get visited by Secret Service, and and on it goes. And I bring that up because actually, since the El Paso and Dayton shootings, USA Today was reporting there's been about 30 people who've been arrested for making criminal threats, threatening mass shootings and things like that. But what's interesting about that, it's done the old-fashioned way, where they're arrested, where there's due process. They get to have their attorney there to contest it. It's not just showing up and grabbing their guns without them knowing what's happening. There's actually, in fact, in a lot of the cases, the guns aren't even taken. The family might take them, but at least they're arrested and dealt with for the threats that they're making. So I think there's a lot of things that we could do better, like encouraging concealed carry, repealing gun-free zones. There's already a lot of tools there. that can be used. What we don't want and don't need is these red flag laws where there's no due process. That's very dangerous.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
And I completely agreed with you about the gun-free zones. I always talk about that. It's kind of a classic meme where it's, like a field of sheep, and there's just a sign that says "No wolves allowed." As if that's going to stop a wolf from coming in and attacking the sheep, right? And that's pretty much what a gun-free zone is. All you're saying is all of these people here are vulnerable. The likelihood that any of them has a weapon is very, very low. So if you want to do a lot of damage, this is where you go. And that's, I still can't believe that people support the gun-free zones after, especially the shooting that happened here in Colorado at the movie theater.
Right.
When we know for a fact that the shooter researched movie theaters and specifically sought out the one that was a gun-free zone so that he could, so that he could make sure he actually succeeded. Because you're right, there's so many times where someone has a concealed carry permit and they kind of put someone down before they even get to do the mass shooting, and we never hear about that in the news because there was no mass shooting, right? There was right. No loss of life other than the person who brandished a gun and was trying to shoot other people. So that's just a blip in the news. But then the mass shooting happens and all these gun laws get proposed and all of that. But I do think there's a disconnect between what I don't know, the gun-free zone thing is really a problem, and I don't think people talk about that enough. I think that if we eliminated gun-free zones, there goes 90% of mass shootings, right? So
absolutely,
it seems like that would be relevant.
There was a lady who talked about that. So at the Longmont City Council meeting last week, she was talking about the Aurora shooting, and that's the thing, that people here who are from Colorado talking about this stuff, right? And bringing up the fact that that shooter specifically went to a place that was a gun-free zone, and then of course an Australian had to put us to shame, and then also go up there and speak about, by the way, these buyback programs that you think are going to work does not work. And when you try to ban things, there's 60 to 80% of firearms are still in existence there, even after all these gun control laws that they had. And it was really nice for him to remind us that we're Americans and people look up to us when it comes to freedom. So but yeah, and I was gonna also when you talked about, it's almost the red flag, right, of seeing maybe that there would be in the government adding these administrative agencies that will have things like that, but we already have that. I mean, in Texas with Greg Abbott, those 8 orders that he put out just a few days ago on the 5th, which I didn't even know this. I guess maybe it's kind of good because now I know that there's a Texas Suspicious Activity Reporting Network. But now I know there is. And that he was using that and essentially to, like you were saying, draconian type of laws that are just, we're 1984 basically already. So yeah, it's scary stuff.
Right. It is scary stuff. But on that note, one of the questions I had written for you here is, we talk a lot about all of the scary legislation that people are trying to pass, all of this draconian, Orwellian things that they're trying to put through. But what makes you hopeful right now about Second Amendment rights in America and about gun rights in America?
That's a good question.
If anything. Hopefully there's something.
No. Well, we do have a lot of hope, and I think in part looking at what has happened in the past. I mean, it helps to remember history, that we've been in this position before. 6 years ago, right after the Newtown shooting, I mean, it was pretty dire because, everybody was saying gun control was going to pass. Everybody. I'm not just talking about the Washington Post and the New York Times. That's a given. But even people on our side, people in the gun community, some of the pro-gun leaders. Everybody was conceding that some gun control was going to pass. Well, except for us. We thought, look, if they're going to pass it, it's certainly not going to be with us agreeing to any of it. We're going to fight, and we're going to rally our base. And, ultimately, after we killed all the gun control, the New York Times had the post-mortem on it all, and they said that Gun Owners of America was one of the key factors in killing the legislation, and it was simply because we rallied the troops, and that scared enough Republicans who were initially thinking about some universal background check type compromise, but once They started hearing from our members, and some of them then started going to their town halls and raising a ruckus, to use y'all's words. It made them think twice. And we saw that again after the Orlando shooting. Harry Reid basically gave us a shout out, not in a kind way, for having killed the no-fly, no-buy legislation that they were trying to pass after the Orlando shooting. In fact, he said in kind of a huff that GOA is worse than bad. He was really upset at our efforts and what we had done, and again, just rallying the base. So, what's going to happen here? I mean, I'm not God, I can't predict, but all I can say is we've been here in the past, and we fight the political fight. We rally the troops. We've, as I mentioned, had over 2 million messages already delivered. It's having an impact, and we just keep fighting that. Sometimes we lose. We lost on the Brady and the semi-auto ban, but that was just a temporary defeat, because then in fighting the fight and getting people engaged, if your representatives don't listen to you, then it really ticks people off. So that's why you had all these pro-gun Democrats. I mean, this had never happened before. Remember, the Congress had been in the control of the Democrats for 40 years. I mean, it was just impossible, the thought that there could be a Republican takeover. And I was walking the halls of Congress back there in 93, 94. I remember legislative offices, especially on the Democrat side, laughing in my face when I was warning them about some of these polls that we've been talking about earlier, how there could be a real ground shift here if you guys keep with this ban on commonly owned firearms. And they just laughed. They just thought that was ludicrous. And yet, they were some of the 50 or 60 some offices that ended up losing the election and shifting control of Republicans. Now, what Republicans need to hear now is, they can easily, that same sword can cut the other way,
right?
Because those voters. One of the other things that our survey found was that 78% of gun-owning voters consider themselves single-issue voters on the gun issue. That is a really powerful statistic. I mean, that means depending on how their representative does on the gun issue will decide whether they vote for them next November or whether they stay home or vote Libertarian. I mean, they probably, they probably won't vote Democrat, but they might find a third party to vote for that's equally as deadly for Senate Republicans as if they did vote for the other side.
I'm glad that you say that, Eric, because I think we told the audience a few weeks ago, and I spoke to a one-time congressman, and he told me that the gun vote is not that big of an issue anymore. Again, it's a one-term congressman, that a Republican congressman, right? And he doesn't think that the gun vote is important, and you're not going to get that many votes. And we're here to say that's wrong.
Yeah,
that's statistically also it's not factually not incorrect, right? But it's also some of these Republicans who just don't care about the gun issue or the Second Amendment issue. So it's really good and it's really uplifting to hear that hope of, our vote does matter, and it will continue to matter, and don't give up on the Republican Party. And if they do, well, then those people are out.
Give them the boot.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's the same thing that Kelly Ayotte thought, that, she had ran pro-gun. She had run as a Tea Party candidate, and then she quickly shifted to the left. And the rest is history. Again, it doesn't take and this is the thing that we try to communicate to Republicans up on the Hill. It doesn't take a lot of your base. Trump won 3 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, by about 80,000 votes. I mean, that's less than 1% of the population of those 3 states. So if enough of those voters get hacked off with the direction that the Republicans are going on the Second Amendment, you got single issue voters, It doesn't mean that they'll, vote for a Cory Booker or something like that.
Oh gosh,
but
sorry,
not even Rosario Dawson was going to vote for her.
I don't see that happening, but it could just mean that it suppresses the vote because they're not as motivated to go vote. Right. They're not as motivated to bring people, or they might vote third party.
Right. And speaking of that, we actually had a listener who said that he wanted to ask you about the bump stock ban and where you guys are at on that.
And also, a lot of people are asking you what you think about background checks.
So we'll go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Both of those, I guess.
Well, real quickly with the bump stock ban, it is still kicking around in the courts. We are at the 6th Circuit Court level, which is in Michigan. And so, in fact, this month we are, last month ATF issued a brief in response to our position, and this month now we have to respond back, and then there'll be some oral arguments after that. So we'll be letting people know, as there's actually news to talk about. There's been, I know, kind of a lull as there's been battling briefs back and forth. As far as background checks, we have opposed background checks from the beginning, and I would put it this way. If you have a God-given right to do something, as our Declaration of Independence speaks, in terms of our rights come from God, right. And the Second Amendment says that this is a right that cannot be infringed, then there should never be a case where law-abiding citizens are asking permission from the government to exercise those rights. Otherwise, that turns a right into a privilege.
Amen.
And once you do that, that results in unfortunate and horrible consequences. And certainly a classic case would be Carol Bown of New Jersey, who was being threatened by a former ex, and so she filed a couple restraining orders against him, and she thought, a piece of paper is not going to make a difference. And so she went to go buy a firearm to protect herself, and they told her, well, there's going to be a wait because you got to go, background check, etc. Well, in New Jersey, it takes a little bit longer, and the check dragged on, and she was still waiting when he showed up in her driveway and stabbed her to death. You notice that felon didn't need a gun to kill her. He could have gotten a knife anywhere, and he did, and she was not able to protect herself. Right. That's the travesty. A right delayed is a right denied. Background checks can be and have been abused. How many people were falsely, in fact, 95% of initial denials under the background check are false positives. Wow. Under the Obama administration, Obama directed all the FBI examiners out of that office so that if you were falsely denied, that you were stuck. There was nobody at the FBI that could examine your case and fix the records. And so this huge backlog developed. Well, see, that shouldn't happen to a God-given right. No. There's men who abuse women, but I would never agree to, having background checks before people get married, or, to stop child abuse, have a background check before you can have children. That, talk about 1984.
Right?
That's, the Orwellian, tyranny that we would never want to live in. So anyway, long answer to that question, but no, Gun Owners of America has always opposed background checks, and so of course we oppose universal background checks, which is really nothing more than a registration system.
Can I add something? This is
Edgar.
Yeah,
go for it, Edgar.
About the background check. So we are an FFL here at Guns for Everyone, and I made a mistake. And I messed up a name completely. Just to give you guys an idea on how insignificant, how ineffective this is. Completely made up a name, essentially, out of a mistake. It shouldn't have gone through. They accepted the application, and they approved the application on essentially
with a fake name?
Essentially a made-up name.
Oh, my gosh.
It went through. So people who...
know what?
Go for it.
That is the dirty little secret of the background check system. Ironically, the General Accounting Office did a study almost 20 years ago. They sent out undercover investigators with fake IDs, and 100% of them were able to purchase a firearm illegally with the fake. But see, of course,
and that has nothing to do with us, the FFLs, by the way.
No, it has nothing to do with you. But if they're bouncing a name off the NICS system and it's a fake name, well, of course, there's not going to be any flag raised on that. So, whenever you hear, the Brady side, the Everytown side, talking about how the background check system stops, bad guys from buying guns from FFLs. Well, that's a bald-faced lie, quite frankly. I mean, because all they have to do is use a fake ID, and it's no problem.
But along that same vein, I think on the flip side of that, another reason why the background checks are such an issue is, I don't know if you guys saw this story, but there was a reporter. It was after, or I guess it was before Walmart announced that they were going to not sell firearms anymore. But this reporter went in and tried to buy a gun because she thought it was so easy. She's like, it's going to take me 10 minutes. And first, she said that it was a struggle to even figure out which Walmart in her area even sold guns, because when she called the store, they wouldn't reveal that information. So she actually just had to drive around store to store. And then she finally found the one that sold guns, and then she went in there and she got denied because of her background check. And then she went to a different Walmart and tried again, and then she got denied again. And so I actually appreciate this journalist. I mean, she clearly was kind of like a leftist who thought that she was going to prove something, but hopefully she actually learned something about how, she probably doesn't view herself as being a risk to the safety of others. Like, she probably wasn't planning on hurting anyone with the gun she purchased. She was trying to make a political statement, but those background checks prevented her from getting a gun. And so maybe now she thinks about how, as a woman, if she wants a gun for self-defense, she's not allowed to purchase it. Legally. And that's a big deal. It's like the woman you were talking about. If you have some crazy person if you have a stalker on you and your background check is preventing you from your self-defense, what are you supposed to do? So anyway, that's just I always thought that story was kind of funny.
Well, what you do is what Catherine Latta of North Carolina did. She was threatened, I think it was by a former boyfriend who had actually, it's been a while since I've seen this story, but I think he had assaulted her, robbed her. And, she went to buy a handgun, and they told her, well, it's going to, take a few days because, background check and, waiting period. She said, I'll be dead by then. So what she did was as she says, I went to the bad part of town and she bought a handgun on the street. And I think it was like within 5 hours of getting home, he showed up again, attacked her. She shot and killed him.
Wow.
See, it saved her life.
Yeah, even though she had to do something because she was abiding, she wasn't going to have to do it the legal way. She had to do it.
In a sense,
she wanted to do it the legal way.
She did want to do it the legal way. Mashere talks about that a lot with like the work that he does.
Yes.
And, I remember going to his first one in Baltimore and him talking about like, look, all these people here, like, they want to do it the right way. But first of all, gun control in Baltimore, I mean, it's ridiculous. But then at the end of the day, they still know that there are people who have hits on them. Like, at the end of the day, they don't care about, the gun control laws. When they go out on the streets, they know they're in danger. And so they're going to do what they need to do. And unfortunately, when they get arrested because of a drug, case or something like that, right? Or a charge, then they are permanently banned from having a firearm. And it's the cycle that keeps going.
Nature of the whole Brady laws as well is because if you have any kind of felony on your record, it's almost a de facto, your guns are gone. And so many things are felonies now, especially at a federal level. Isn't it something like the average American commits like 10 federal felonies every day or something like that? So it's really a problem.
It's a criminal justice reform issue. We've talked about that. It is. And if you really care about that, you're talking about the privilege, a right has become a privilege. I talked about that at the Longmont City Council, the fact that they're putting all these restrictions, registrations, certain type of firearms, certain permits. All of those are making your right that you have a God-given right into a privilege that most people who are low income cannot afford. And that therefore perpetuating this cycle.
And I really liked what you said, Eric, about how other rights are not infringed on the way that the Second Amendment is. Because could you imagine if before, like I said I was a Catholic, right? Like, could you imagine if before I was allowed to go to church, I had to go get a permit?
Right.
Like I had to get a permit to be a Catholic. I mean, that people would lose their minds. Or like if I had to get a permit to write a book or to give a speech. I mean, we're almost getting there though. Like the First Amendment's kind of, people are trying to push on that, but I do think that with us, with some of our other rights, we understand inherently that you shouldn't need a permit to exercise a God-given right. But it seems like with the Second Amendment, because there's a weapon involved, people just don't know how to act.
Mm-hmm. So. And on that point, sometimes people will say, "Well, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater if there is no fire." So the First Amendment doesn't protect that kind of dangerous speech. And what I would say to that is, if you yell fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire and there's damage as a result, people get trampled, et cetera, you're punished after the fact. But here's what we don't do. We don't gag everybody walking into the theater ahead of time to make sure that they don't yell fire.
Right. Oh, I love that example.
We don't run background checks on them before they go into theater to see if they've ever abused their freedom of speech. No, we punish the infraction after the fact. And so we would argue same thing with the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have a right to commit murder with a firearm.
Yeah,
but if I do, then I'm punished after the fact. We shouldn't punish all the millions of law-abiding people by infringing their liberties just because of what one wacko might do with a firearm.
Right.
We don't have red flag laws that keep that guy from going into the theater, right? Just suspicious of saying fire, right?
Like I don't know, this guy might have Tourette's. we got to make sure that he's not allowed to go to any movie theaters because he might shout something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the same people who are so up in arms about voter suppression and poll tax and stuff like that, right, where there was literally again making your right a privilege, and then but where are they on this, and they just don't have that, they're not intellectually honest to allow that to be something that's across the board. If you figure out that's that way, and then we're supposed to protect our rights in that sense, and it's a privilege when you make it something that you have to pay for, then that should be for all of our rights.
Yeah, it should apply across the board.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why, honestly, so many of us are one-issue voters on the Second Amendment, because we also understand that if we lose that, our ability to make sure that the other rights are protected is gone. Like what we're seeing with the protests in Hong Kong and stuff, and what happened in Venezuela after their whole socialist economy burst into flames. It's like they didn't have any way to protect themselves against their tyrannical government, and what can they do? Nothing. I mean, I guess they can protest in the streets, but if the government's the only one who has weapons, then you're really just beholden to whatever they say, and that means they can infringe on all of your rights, not just your right to protect yourself with a weapon or with a firearm.
Absolutely.
So, that's right.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for this. This has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here.
And I'm sure there are people in the comments and stuff like that. If you have questions, again, you can email us at triggerwarning2a@gmail.com, or you can email, or Eric, if they want to contact you or contact GOA, how do they do that? Is there a way to do that?
Sure. Yeah. The best way is to go through our website at gunowners.org, and you can use the contact form there. While you're there at gunowners.org, not only take action, but also sign up for our email alerts. And that way, we don't, it is a low volume alert list. In that, what I mean by that is, we use it for action. So, we're not just going to fill your inbox with stories, as useful as that might be, stories of, what's going on in the news. No, our alerts are calls to action. And quite frankly, there's been a lot going on lately. So anyway, please stay engaged in the fight. You guys said earlier, if one person sends something, it's just like a drop in the ocean. But part of the beauty of being connected with over 2 million other gun owners is that, when we mobilize, then it makes a huge splash, because it's a big resounding, people sounding off together rather than just one lone person here and there. So it's really making a difference. So please sign up. It's totally free to sign up for the email alerts, and we'll keep you up to date and encouraging you to take action on what's going on here in Washington.
I have a question for you, Eric. and I'm not as educated as these ladies here, and as eloquent.
They're on the ball.
Well, thanks, guys.
How does this Anchor Baby Mexican become a member on your board if he was to be interested in that?
Oh.
How to become a board member?
Yeah.
Or just a member
No,
of
board
GOA?
member. A member of your board.
Well, boy, that's very ambitious. First of all, are you already a member?
He's like, well, now you can be. Now you can be a girl with my code that you can find in the comment section.
25%
yeah,
off.
with 25% off. So you're welcome.
You know, it's like to be president, you have to be a citizen first. In fact, born in the country. So, first things first.
The country is GOA, just so you know.
Is there walls?
Well, I'll just shamelessly say that I think Edgar would be a great board member. So anyway,
yeah.
Hey,
I'll plug him.
Edgar, I'd love to meet you. Look forward to it, buddy.
Well, thank you again so much, Eric, for being on here with us.
Yes.
And please, if you liked this podcast, the best thing you can do. I mean, obviously, we would love if you want to become a patron on Patreon. It's triggerwording2a at patreon.com. But if you really want to support us, the best thing you can do is just to share this video and to share this podcast with as many people as you think will want to hear it. Because the true thing is to get this message out. And just like Eric was saying, if one of us says something, it might not change the world, but if all of us speak up, it can really make a difference. So please share this video if you liked it.
Yeah. And full disclosure, actually, you're talking about Kelly a lot. I actually interned for her in 2014. That was back in the old days, right when I turned from a Democrat to Republican, so I was still green. Still green. I remember the biggest thing I got from being in Capitol Hill for 6 months was that actually the representatives and congressmen and senators actually do pay attention to those who call and who email. Is the fact that those who call and email, most of the time, the weird wacko ones, I'm sorry, but they are.
Myself included.
And there's not the people that we actually want to, be talking to them and getting their voices heard. So I will say from experience that on that end, that I remember after work every day, Senator Ayotte would ask, like, who emailed, who called? And it was like, maybe the count was like on one hand, right? Like, so it was very small. So it matters, guys. It's just people don't do it. So I want to tell you guys that it matters.
Well, thank you for that encouragement. That should encourage people to take action. And so, I just want to thank people who are watching us here. Thank you for those who have joined while we've been, talking here. Join GOA. And those of you who are already members, it's really important for us to stay engaged in this fight. Right. And so, Antonia and Nina, thank you so much for what you guys are doing. This is really important, just keeping people informed, keeping them activated. This is how we're going to win this battle.
Absolutely.
And thank you for all you do. Thank you to Gun Owners of America. You guys are really fighting for all of us with the work you do. So we appreciate you.
Okay. Well, you have a great night. Again, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Of course, we're going to keep in contact. So thank you guys to our audience watching and listening. You guys are the ones to make this happen and staying engaged. I'm sure I always love looking at the comment section after our interviews.
I know. I love going through and reading the live chat through again,
when you guys are fighting with each other. It's so cute. It's so cute. It's always heated debates about liberty. I love it.
I know,
so
I
it's
like
good. It's good stuff. So thank you guys. It's been Trigger Warning 2A, and I'm Antonia Okafor.
And I'm Nina Privo. We'll see you next Monday.
Yes, we'll see you next Monday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.